So I told her testimony from children must be viewed extremely skeptically. I'm sure you and your friend experienced something that frightened you. However, the claim that you saw a ghost is unsubstantiated, and you have no grounds that I can see to assert such a conclusion. I told her UFO abduction stories and Bigfoot encounters are also provided by people in groups. But I think there's a lot of people who would say that it's still not valid.
Yeah.
I said, if you truly were saying, quote, I'm not sure what I saw and what the cause of the experience was, unquote, that would be honest. The moment you say you saw a ghost, unless you verified it, you're not being honest. You're adding something to the story that is unsubstantiated and unjustified by the experience you describe. So, they saw something that frightened them. There are many strange claims that are made by groups. It's not proof of what they saw. It's proof of what they believed they saw. In her response to me, she says, I have no idea what it was. And she did admit that perhaps it was wrong to label it a ghost. She says, do you know, over the years I've pondered endlessly over what, quote, it could have been. I still, to this day...
Yeah, but the problem is she's now pondering it in a vacuum. I mean,
right.
If you were dealing with a scientific phenomenon, you would go back and try to duplicate the experience. You would maybe run the tape over and over again if you had a tape. But when you just think about stuff that's already kind of fuzzy to begin with, well, I mean, a problem is that your brain fills in the details.
Right. She said she doesn't know what it was, and to this day, she still has no idea. But then she tells more about the experience. And to her credit, I will say there are a lot of people who, when they start to tell more about the experience, they try to get sort of more... the claim becomes more ridiculous, where it becomes like, it had to be this, and it gets more and more pressure to make it more real. But what happened is she actually, I think, kept it pretty honest.
Right.
And one of the things she said was, we got to the top of the stairs where his sister's bedroom door was open, and there was a piercing, and I don't know what she means by piercing. There was a piercing head and shoulders beaming from ear to ear at us. And I assumed that meant a smile and a piercing stare, but I'm reading that into it because I don't really know what that means. She says, I'm certainly not a superstitious person. I try to be rational. We had walked up the stairs in the darkness, as we always did. And here I recognize that she, did agree. I don't know what it was. She viewed this thing from the stairwell through a doorway. She says she's not superstitious, but I'm going to say that because she's afraid of the dark to this day, I will call that denial.
Yeah.
And she saw this apparition in darkness.
I think if people are honest and smart, they will, as they retell stories, they will anticipate what kind of objections other people are likely to bring up. I mean, that's like an actual requirement in a scientific paper.
Right.
You try to think of stuff that people will object to about your paper, and you try to write it down first so that they won't have a chance to jump to it and make you look silly.
Right, but to me, though, the fact that this is a person who has a superstitious mindset, that's why she does not anticipate the skeptical response before she says it.
Right.
When you say to somebody, I saw this in the dark, you already should have it in your head that the person is going to say, if you saw it and it was dark in the room, how can you be sure of what you saw? It was dark. People don't see well in the dark. I mean, that's just a reality. She says there's so much we still just don't know, and also she asked me a fair question. What would it take for you to believe that there is a spiritual something other than, spiritual realm? If you were to witness something with your eyes, fully awake, would you still claim it being something other than
they always fall back on that.
What it would look like from the outset.
Okay, well, I know that my story actually turned out to be pretty lame when you questioned me, but I bet you wouldn't believe me even if I had a full-on recorded sighting in full daylight with 5 adults around. You still wouldn't believe me, and that's an assumption on
Well, what I told her was, what it would take for me to believe there was something rather than nothing would be a repeatable demonstration in controlled conditions using a double-blind method. And that's where we're going to...
science.
Well, I told her as well that when you drive cross-country, and I don't know how far she's ever driven, but when you drive cross-country, especially in heat, you see what's commonly referred to as a mirage.
Oasis.
You look at the street in front of you, and you see water. But you keep driving and you never get to that water. But you'll
Right.
see it again and again and again. And you could have a dozen people, well, however many people will fit in your vehicle, and they will all look ahead and see the water in the road.
Yeah,
but it's not there.
actually your brain screwing with you. It's like
Right.
a reflection of light
It's
off
heat,
a hot surface.
light, yeah, and that's something everyone could see, and we would all say it looks just like water on the road, but
Right.
it's not water
What
on the
you
road.
saw is accurate, but what you think it means
Right.
is, a mistake.
Right, you're misidentifying what you're seeing
Right.
because it looks like something else. I gave her another example of when sometimes I think most people have had the experience of thinking they see a dead animal on the side of the road. You get up to it and it's just a bag, or it's like some piece of sod, or it's someone's sweater, and but I don't think there's a person alive who's past a decent age who hasn't had the experience of thinking they saw something and then realizing it was something else. But if you leave that situation before you examine it closer, you're going to think the first thing you saw is what you saw. You're not going to ever know that you were wrong about it unless you investigate it. All right, she said that she saw this for about 4 seconds in another email. She looked at it for 4 seconds. It was long enough and close enough for me to determine it was a clear head and shoulders. It still couldn't really... She goes... this is interesting. Even though I've looked at it for 4 seconds now, and that was long enough, and it was close enough for me to determine that it was a clear head and shoulders, it still couldn't really have been there. And in my mind, she answered her own question. She viewed it for a few seconds, and she understands it couldn't really have been there. And yet, the assertion is that I really saw something.